Outrage in paradise. Seattle tourist accused of throwing rock at endangered Hawaiian monk seal. A shocking act of alleged animal cruelty has sparked outrage in Hawaii after a 37-year-old man from Seattle was detained for reportedly throwing a rock at an endangered Hawaiian monk seal near the Lahaina shoreline. Now let's dive deeper and explore every layer of this story on our AI podcast.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Picture this. You've been saving up for, I don't know, months, maybe even years, for that ultimate dream Hawaiian vacation.
Right, the big trip.
Exactly. You finally step off the plane, and everything is like exactly as you imagined it. The air smells like salt and tropical flowers. You hear the waves crashing.
It's the whole postcard experience.
Yeah, you're walking down the beach, the sun is warming your shoulders, and you are just soaking in this absolute pristine paradise. I mean, it's idyllic. It is the ultimate escape.
Oh, absolutely. It's what everyone wants.
But then, right there on the shoreline, that perfect image just shatters completely. It collides head-on with an act of such shocking alleged animal cruelty that it sparks widespread immediate outrage.
Yeah, and not just locally. Right?
Yeah, not just on the beach among the onlookers. This cascade of anger went across the entire internet.
You have this environment that represents pure peace and natural beauty for so many people. And then, in an instant, it becomes the backdrop for a deeply disturbing, completely preventable human intervention.
Which is just so jarring.
It really is. It forces us to look at how we behave when we step out of our daily lives and, walk right into wild habitats.
Right. So today we are pulling from an incredibly detailed article titled Sacred Shores: The Cost of Harassing Hawaii's Monk Seals. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a very specific, very unsettling incident that recently took place on those shores.
And we really need to look at the boundaries here.
Yeah, we're not just reading the headlines today. We want to understand the biological boundaries, the heavy legal boundaries, and the very real, visceral human safety boundaries that are at play when tourists interact with endangered wildlife.
There's a lot of layers to it.
There really are. Okay, let's unpack this. Because I have to admit, I am naturally astonished. Like, you spend thousands of dollars on a flight to paradise, and your instinct is to allegedly harm its absolute rarest inhabitants.
It's baffling.
It completely defies logic to me.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to recognize that this isn't just a bizarre, isolated incident. Yeah, what we're looking at here is a massive flashpoint in a growing, highly charged tension between human recreation and wildlife conservation. We're seeing more and more of these collisions as the human footprint rapidly expands into these protected, fragile habitats.
So it's like a much larger issue.
Exactly. This story is a microcosm of a much larger crisis.
Okay, let's get right into the inciting incident that brought all of this to light, because the timeline moves quickly here. The date is May 5th.
Right.
The Maui Police Department, the MPD, receives a call, and they immediately reach out to a very specific agency called the Division of Conservation and Resources Enforcement. They're known as DoCare.
Right, DoCare.
And the report they are filing is for an active case of monk seal harassment.
And, that phrasing alone tells you everything about how seriously local authorities treat this.
Yeah.
Yeah, they aren't just logging some generic nuisance complaint or like a disturbing the peace call. There is a specific, highly prioritized operational protocol for wildlife harassment.
Which makes sense.
It does. They're bringing in specialized enforcement officers who deal entirely with conservation law.
Wow. So witnesses on the beach step up without hesitation. They give the responding officers a physical description, and the police quickly locate and detain a 37-year-old man visiting from Seattle.
Okay.
The allegation is that he threw a rock at a monk seal near the Lahaina shoreline.
Through a rock.
Yeah, and authorities noted that when questioned, the man declined to make any statement regarding the allegations. But what really elevates this from, a foolish tourist prank to a potentially devastating act of biological sabotage is the specific identity of the victim.
Right, because the seal in question is highly documented. This wasn't just some random animal passing through.
Not at all. Her name is Kaiwi. Officially, she is tracked by wildlife experts under the designation RK96. She's a 15-year-old female Hawaiian monk seal.
A very well-known local.
Yes, exactly. And the incredibly critical detail here is that Kaiwi had just recently given birth to a newborn pup. She was resting in a protected area, cordoned off behind a temporary safety fence set up at Kaimana Beach.
And to understand the gravity of that vulnerability, we really have to dive deep into the biology of the post-birth period for Hawaiian monk seals.
Because it's not like other mammals, right?
No, it's not like a human mother bringing a baby home to a nice climate-controlled nursery. When a monk seal mother gives birth, she hauls herself out of the ocean and stays on the beach for about 5 to 7 weeks to nurse.
Just on the beach.
Just on the beach. And during this entire period, she essentially does not eat. She fasts.
Wait, really? 5 to 7 weeks with no food?
Completely fasting, yeah.
Yeah.
She relies entirely on her stored blubber to sustain her own life and to produce the incredibly rich, high-fat milk her pup needs to survive.
Wow. I want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. Imagine those temporary safety fences on that beach as the double doors of a hospital maternity ward.
That's a good way to look at it.
Actually, not even just a maternity ward. Think of it like a neonatal intensive care unit. You have a mother who has just gone through the immense physical trauma of labor, literally starving herself to keep her baby alive, resting in a highly delicate, high-stakes environment.
Exactly.
Throwing a rock in this scenario. I mean, you wouldn't walk into an ICU and start banging on the incubators. It's an incredibly vulnerable state.
The ICU analogy captures the metabolic stakes perfectly. I mean, every single calorie that mother possesses is budgeted for survival.
Everything is calculated.
Right. Wildlife officials emphasize that human interference during this specific window of time is uniquely dangerous because it forces the mother to burn vital energy.
Because she gets stressed out.
Yes. If a tourist throws a rock, or even just gets too close to take a selfie, the mother has to shift from a resting state to a state of high alert. Her heart rate spikes, stress hormones flood her system, and she might physically move to shield her pup. And that burns calories she absolutely cannot replace. It disrupts the nursing cycle. In extreme cases of chronic stress or sudden panic, it can even lead to the mother abandoning the pup entirely.
It's quite literally life or death for the newborn then. Every calorie she burns reacting to a tourist is a calorie stolen from her baby's development.
The margin for error in their early development is practically zero. The pup is entirely dependent on her for survival, warmth, and nutrition.
When you realize how fragile this pup is, the heavy federal response suddenly makes total sense.
It really does.
We're moving from this specific mother-pup pair to the species as a whole and looking at the massive biological and legal fortress mandated by the government to protect them.
And the reason for that heavy mandate really comes down to population metrics. Hawaiian monk seals are among the rarest marine mammals in the entire world.
They're endemic, right?
Yeah, they are endemic to Hawaii, meaning they exist naturally nowhere else on the planet. And there is only a small, wildly fragile population remaining in the wild.
Because of those dire numbers, these seals are essentially surrounded by an invisible armor of federal and state laws. We're talking about the Endangered Species Act, the ESA, and the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the MMPA.
Very strict laws.
Very strict. The rules are crystal clear. Under these laws, it is strictly illegal to disturb, feed, harass, injure, or even approach these animals too closely. Doe Care Chief Jason Radilla did not mince words when addressing this specific case.
What did he say?
His exact warning was, this is a very crucial time in the life of this pup, so for these people to be breaching the area and getting close is not a good idea at all.
Yeah, the wording of those federal laws is intentionally comprehensive. The MMPA defines harassment in a way that covers a very wide range of behaviors long before any physical injury actually occurs.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here on behalf of anyone listening who might think this sounds, a bit intense.
Yeah, go for it.
I hear the word harassment and I naturally think of physical harm. Beating an animal, trapping an animal.
Right.
If a tourist throws a rock and it just splashes in the water near the seal, or lands a few feet away in the sand without touching her, no physical harm is done. Why is the federal government treating a splashed rock like a major crime? Isn't charging someone under the Endangered Species Act for a near miss a massive overreaction?
What's fascinating here is how the law defines psychological and behavioral impact on the animal.
The psychological impact.
Yeah, under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, harassment is actually divided into categories. You have level A, which is the potential to injure, but you also have level B harassment.
Okay, what is level B?
Level B is defined as any act of pursuit, torment, or annoyance that has the potential to disturb a marine mammal in the wild by causing a disruption of behavioral patterns.
Wait, a disruption of behavioral patterns.
Exactly. So if your action causes that resting, fasting mother seal to open her eyes in alarm, lift her head, shift her body weight, or interrupt nursing, you have legally altered her natural behavioral pattern. You have harassed her.
So the law is literally tracking the caloric deficit and the stress response, not just broken bones or bruises.
That's it exactly. Conservationists see protecting these seals as an absolute, non-negotiable, critical step for the species' survival.
Well,
The law isn't merely a punitive measure for bad actors. It is an active mechanism designed to preserve an incredibly fragile biological timeline, a timeline that has been playing out on those beaches for millions of years.
a timeline that doesn't care about someone's 7-day vacation itinerary.
Right.
It brings up a huge psychological disconnect, I think. You have federal laws, heavy signage on the beaches, and literal physical temporary fences set up in the sand, yet tourists still step over them.
It happens all the time.
It seems like people step off the plane and view the island as a curated theme park designed for their entertainment, rather than a vital, functioning ecosystem where real survival is happening.
People often go on vacation to escape rules. They step into a resort town and assume the environment is simply a backdrop for their leisure.
Yeah, the main character syndrome.
Oh, absolutely. They fail to see the invisible biological stakes, focusing only on their immediate desire for an interaction or a story or a photograph to post online.
Or in this alleged case with the Seattle tourist, just an inexplicable urge to throw a rock. Let's pivot to the immediate visceral consequence of these encounters from the other side.
The safety aspect.
Yeah, we've established how humans endanger the seals, but we need to talk about how the seals can endanger humans.
I think this answers the so what for anyone listening who might still be somewhat apathetic about conservation and just wants to enjoy their beach day.
Because if the moral argument of protecting a fasting mother doesn't resonate, and the legal threat of federal charges doesn't resonate, the physical reality of a cornered wild animal certainly should.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Tourists look at a monk seal resting on the beach, and they see this cute, round, sluggish creature just basking in the sun like a giant sausage.
Which they are, when they're relaxed.
Right. But people want to go up and pet it. They completely forget they're dealing with a massive, fiercely protective, wild predator. And that misperception is incredibly common and routinely leads to hospital visits. Officials are issuing stark, urgent warnings that mother monk seals can become highly aggressive if they feel their pups are threatened.
Highly aggressive.
Yes. Chief Radola actually referenced a very terrifying incident that happened back in 2022 to illustrate this exact point, and it took place at the very same location, Kamana Beach.
The details of that 2022 incident are horrifying. According to the source material, a swimmer got too close and was attacked by a protective mother seal in the water.
Yeah.
The injuries were not minor scratches. This swimmer suffered serious, deep cuts to their face, back, and arm.
And if we look at the biology of maternal instinct, this reaction makes perfect evolutionary sense. A mother seal's primary hardwired directive is the survival of her offspring.
So she's just doing her job.
Exactly. When she perceives a threat, whether that is a tiger shark cruising near the shoreline or a human ignoring a safety fence, her response is going to be defensive, explosive, and potentially violent.
Because she's an apex predator.
A monk seal is an apex predator in its element. They weigh upwards of 400 to 600 pounds. In the water, they move with a speed and agility that a human swimmer cannot even begin to comprehend, let alone outswim.
It's an ancient defense mechanism.
Yeah.
You trigger that, and you are no longer a tourist. You are perceived as a predator, and you will be treated like one.
Disturbing a mother seal puts both humans and animals at severe immediate risk. Those temporary safety fences we talked about aren't just conservation tools.
Right.
They are physical barriers meant to keep tourists out of the emergency room just as much as they are meant to keep the seals safe. It is a boundary of mutual protection.
Mutual protection. I really like framing it that way. It's a barrier against our own ignorance. Knowing all the complex legal ramifications and knowing the very real, bloody, physical dangers of becoming the target of an angry 400-pound mother seal, let's look at the societal reaction to this latest rock-throwing incident and the strict guidelines that officials are begging people to follow.
The public reaction has been intense and unforgiving.
I can imagine.
The incident has triggered massive, widespread online anger. People across the country, and especially locals in Hawaii, are actively calling for much stricter punishments for anyone caught harming endangered wildlife. There is a palpable exhaustion with seeing these sacred habitats disrespected.
Historically, the authorities have not taken these infractions lightly either, right? Past cases of monk seal harassment have resulted in incredibly hefty fines levied by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Yeah, very hefty fines.
We are talking about financial penalties reaching into the thousands of dollars.
Those NOAA fines are severe. They are designed to sting. Unfortunately, authorities are noting that this latest incident with Kaiwi highlights a growing, systemic problem of tourists actively ignoring wildlife safety guidelines across the islands.
So what does this all mean for you? If you are packing your bags for Maui tomorrow, or even just thinking about how we interact with wild spaces closer to home, there is a literal line in the sand you need to know about.
Right, you need to be informed.
Being a well-informed traveler means you need to memorize DoCare's strict viewing rules. These are not polite suggestions, they are legal mandates. First, you must stay at least 50 feet away from all monk seals at all times.
And to give you a visual on that, 50 feet is roughly the length of a semi-truck trailer. That is the minimum distance required to ensure you aren't triggering that level B harassment we discussed, altering the animal's behavior.
That's a great visual. Second, if it is a mother with a pup, that distance triples. You must stay at least 150 feet away.
That is half a football field. You should be using the zoom lens on your camera, not your physical proximity.
Third, if you are traveling with dogs or walking a local dog, you must keep them leashed and far away from the seals. Dogs can easily transmit diseases to the seals, and a barking dog will immediately spike the mother's stress levels.
Right.
Fourth, never attempt to touch, feed, or disturb the animals in any way whatsoever. And finally, avoid swimming near mother seals and their pups entirely, given the sheer physical danger highlighted by that 2022 attack.
As for the current status of the situation with Kaiwi, authorities are continuing to actively investigate the rock-throwing case involving the Seattle man.
So it's still ongoing.
It is. Meanwhile, marine wildlife experts are closely monitoring Kaiwi and her newborn pup to ensure their ongoing safety and to make sure the pup is nursing and recovering properly after the stress of the encounter.
It really boils down to a contract of respect. The financial penalties, those thousands of dollars in NOAA fines, serve as the ultimate heavy-handed deterrent when moral appeals or common sense fail.
There is a profound tension here between the incredible privilege of visiting these sacred shores and the heavy responsibility that comes with that privilege.
Absolutely.
If you are granted access to these wildly beautiful, fragile spaces, you're expected to adhere to the rules that keep the ecosystem intact. You are a guest in their home.
Let's do a quick recap of our journey on this deep dive today. We started with the shocking, anger-inducing incident involving a 37-year-old tourist allegedly throwing a rock at Kaiwi, a 15-year-old Hawaiian monk seal, and her newborn pup while they rested behind a fence.
We covered a lot of ground today.
We really did. We unpacked the stringent, invisible fortress of federal laws like the ESA and MMPA and explored the biological reality that a mother seal is fasting and budgeting every single calorie to keep her pup alive.
Which is so crucial to understand.
Yeah. And we talked about the physical dangers, looking at the stark reality of the 2022 attack that proved angering a 400-pound mother seal can easily land a human in the hospital with severe injuries. And finally, we laid out the strict guidelines for coexistence, the mandatory 50-foot and 150-foot rules.
It is a lot of heavy information to process, especially when we usually frame these locations strictly within the context of a relaxing, carefree vacation.
Yeah, nobody wants to think about federal crimes on their vacation.
Right. But it leads to a very complex reality about how we interact with the natural world. Think about the paradox of modern ecotourism.
What do you mean by that?
Well, as humans, we travel thousands of miles because we possess a deep, inherent desire to connect with untouched nature and rare wildlife. We crave that pristine, authentic experience.
Yeah, we want to feel connected to the earth.
Yet, as this incident on the shoreline shows, our mere presence and our desperate, sometimes reckless need to interact with that environment might be the exact thing that destroys it. The truest form of appreciating nature might actually be learning how to leave it entirely alone.
Okay, one question for you. How can tourists visiting Hawaii be better educated about respecting endangered wildlife after a Seattle man was accused of throwing a rock at an vulnerable Hawaiian monk seal protecting her newborn pup? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.